What if everything you learned in history class was just a placeholder? A carefully crafted narrative designed to hide a truth too powerful for the public to handle. Open a first edition copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica from 1771, and you'll find a massive sovereign nation listed that no longer exists in any modern textbook. They called it Tartaria. According to the records, it was the largest empire on the face of the earth. Yet today, it has been completely scrubbed from our collective memory. Walk through any major capital city and look down. Why are their windows buried 10 feet underground, submerged in soil, as if a global cataclysm was simply paved over? The Vatican claims to hold the keys to heaven, but their secret archives may actually hold the maps to this lost world. An empire they spent 300 years erasing from your schools. Mainstream history is a fortress built by the winners. If you open a modern history book, Tartary is dismissed as a geographic misunderstanding. They tell us it was a lawless wilderness inhabited by warring tribes. But if that's true, why was the official standard chronology of human history created by two men with deep ties to the Jesuit order? Joseph Scaliger and Dionysius Batavius were the architects of our timeline in the 16th and 17th centuries. They were tasked with organizing the chaotic records of the past into a neat, linear story. Is it just a coincidence that this new history perfectly aligned with the Vatican's rise to global dominance? The red flags are hiding in plain sight. Consider the impossible architecture of the 1800s. We are told that pioneer settlers arrived in the American West with nothing but hand saws and horse-drawn wagons. Yet, somehow, they managed to build massive stone Greco-Roman cathedrals and sprawling government buildings in a matter of months. Buildings with intricate masonry and heavy granite blocks that would challenge a modern construction crew today. Where did they get the limestone? Where did they get the massive glass panes? Or is it more likely that these structures were already there, leftovers from a civilization that had been cleared out? Then there is the matter of time itself. In 1582, the Vatican implemented the Gregorian calendar. They literally deleted 10 days from existence overnight to fix the leap year. But some researchers, like the mathematician Anatoly Fomenko, argue that the Vatican did much more than fix the leap year. They suggest the Church artificially inserted hundreds, even thousands of years into the timeline. This is known as the phantom time hypothesis. The goal was simple: to push the advanced era of Tartaria so far into the ancient past that we would never think to look for it in the present. The most glaring piece of evidence for this global network is the star fort. You can find them on every continent, from the heart of Russia to the coast of Florida and even in the middle of the Pacific. These are not just military outposts. They are geometrically perfect fractal patterns, often featuring complex subterranean water systems and conductive metal components. Mainstream archaeology says they were built to defend against cannons. Yet, many of these forts are shaped in a way that creates dead zones where a defender couldn't even see the enemy. What if they weren't forts at all? What if they were nodes in a global energy grid, a massive, interconnected technological system that was systematically dismantled? If these people were just nomads, as the history books claim, why did they leave behind the most complex stone structures and engineering marvels on the planet? The official story is full of holes, and the documents the Vatican forgot to burn are finally beginning to tell a different story. If you want to hide a civilization, you have to start with the maps. But before the Great Cleansing of the 19th century, cartographers were remarkably consistent about what existed in the East. Take a look at the maps produced by the masters, men like Abraham Ortelius and Gerardus Mercator. In their 16th century renderings, Tartaria isn't a footnote. It is a massive, sprawling empire with clearly defined borders, separate from the Grand Duchy of Moscow and the Chinese Empire. But the most smoking gun piece of evidence isn't found in an obscure attic. It was in the world's most trusted reference book. In the 1771 first edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, Volume 3, there is an entry that should have changed everything you were taught in school. It explicitly describes Tartary as a vast country in northern Asia, bounded by Siberia to the north and west. It notes that this was Great Tartary, and it occupied a territory larger than almost any other nation on Earth. This isn't just a label for a region, it's a description of a political entity. The entry even goes on to list the different provinces, such as Mongol Tartary and Tibet Tartary. If Tartaria was just a vague geographic term, why did it have its own sovereign status? Why did it have its own flags, featuring a black eagle, an owl, and a griffin? Official charts from the 18th and 19th centuries clearly display the Tartarian flag alongside the flags of Great Britain, France, and the United States. You don't put a vague region on a naval flag chart. You put a power that has a navy. The evidence of this empire's existence was so overwhelming that the cover-up had to reach into the highest levels of modern intelligence. In 1998, a CIA document titled National Cultural Erasure was declassified. Originally written in 1957, this internal report discusses the Soviet Union's efforts to systematically rewrite the history of the Tatars. The document states that the history of Tartaria was being falsified to eliminate any mention of their former independence and to foster a new Soviet national identity. This is a declassified admission from the CIA that a major world power was actively deleting the history of a specific culture to control the future. If the Soviets were doing it in the 20th century, why is it so hard to believe the Vatican and the European monarchs were doing it in the 18th? The erasure wasn't just on paper, it was built into the very land. Consider the Great Wall of China. We're told it was built by the Chinese to keep out the barbarian Tatars. But look closely at the architectural details. Many researchers have pointed out that the defensive crenellations, the gaps where you would fire arrows or cannons, actually face south, toward China. Furthermore, the entrance gates are often located on the northern side of the wall. This suggests the wall wasn't built by the Chinese to keep people out. It was built by the Tartarians to mark their southern border and defend against Chinese incursions. It was a boundary of an empire that mainstream history desperately wants to pretend never existed. But the mystery goes deeper than just borders and flags. Many of these historical maps show cities in the middle of what is now the Gobi Desert or the Siberian wasteland. Cities with names, populations, and trade routes. Where did these people go? Why do we see hundreds of cities in the 1600s that simply vanish by the 1800s? The official story says it was war or famine, but those are convenient excuses for a total demographic reset. The closer you look at the 19th century, the more you see the fingerprints of a global catastrophe that was used as a cover to finalize the theft of Tartarian land. We see a period of great fires that leveled city after city. Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, Seattle, all in a very short window of time. And after the fires, the new architects didn't just rebuild, they buried what was left. The maps prove they were there. The documents prove the intelligence agencies knew it. But where did the people go? This is where the story takes a dark turn into the mid-1800s, where we find the most chilling evidence of a manufactured society. To truly understand the disappearance of Tartaria, we have to talk about a theory that mainstream science refuses to touch, the mud flood. Some researchers suggest that in the mid-19th century, a global cataclysm, possibly a massive seismic event or a localized plasma discharge, liquefied the soil and caused a massive layer of silt and earth to settle over the entire planet. Look at the evidence in your own city. Why does almost every historic downtown area feature buildings with windows half buried in the ground? We are told these are daylight basements. But look at the construction. You will see grand, ornate entrance doors that have been turned into windows, and windows that have been sliced in half by the sidewalk. Architecturally, it makes no sense. Why would builders in the 1800s spend thousands of dollars on intricate stonework and windows only to bury them 6 feet under the dirt? The what if is staggering. What if these buildings weren't built with basements at all? What if we are living on top of the ruins of a previous civilization that was literally drowned in mud? If such an event occurred, it would have left the world in a state of chaos, a perfect opportunity for a great reset. This brings us to the most suspicious period in modern history, the era of the world's fairs. Between 1851 and 1915, massive temporary cities were built across the globe, from London and Paris to Chicago and San Francisco. Take the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, also known as the White City. We are told this was built in less than 2 years by a workforce using horse and buggy technology. It spanned over 600 acres and featured massive Romanesque palaces that looked like they had stood for 1,000 years. The official story says they were made of staff, a cheap mixture of plaster and hemp fiber. But if they were just temporary plaster sheds, why were they fitted with the most advanced electrical lighting system the world had ever seen? This was a time when most of the world was still using candles, yet the White City was glowing with thousands of incandescent bulbs. Researchers believe these weren't temporary fairs at all. They were the original majestic cities of the Tartarian Empire that had survived the mud flood. The elites of the New World Order simply moved in, put up a few plaster facades to claim they built them, and used the fairs as a final tour of the old world's technology. And when the fairs ended, they didn't sell the buildings. They didn't repurpose them. They dynamited them. They burned them to the ground. It was a controlled demolition of history. By destroying these palaces of electricity, the winners of the reset ensured that the secret of free atmospheric energy would die with the ruins. But you can't just erase buildings. You have to erase the people who remember them. This leads us to one of the most heartbreaking and mysterious chapters in American history, the orphan trains. Between 1854 and 1929, an estimated 250,000 children were gathered from the streets of eastern cities like New York and shipped by train to the rural West. The official story is that these were just poor orphans from the slums. But where did they all come from? Why were there suddenly hundreds of thousands of children without parents in a time of supposedly great Victorian family values? Some researchers suggest these children were the survivors of the reset, the offspring of the Tartarian population that had been decimated. Think about the timing. This massive influx of millions of children with no past coincides exactly with the time Tartarian history vanished from schoolbooks. If you wanted to rewrite the history of a planet, you would need a blank slate. You would need a generation of people with no elders to tell them the truth. These children were placed in state-run schools, given a new official history, and told that their ancestors were primitive pioneers who arrived in a wild, empty land. They were taught that the massive stone buildings they saw in their new cities were built by the founding fathers, not the civilization that came before. While these children were being re-educated, the Vatican was busy consolidating the evidence. They weren't just saving souls, they were collecting technology. Consider the Antiquitech that is still visible on top of old-world cathedrals and state capitals today. The copper domes, the iron finials, and the strange, needle-like spires. Modern science calls them lightning rods, but a lightning rod's job is to ground electricity to protect the building. The Tartarian towers were designed to do the opposite. They were atmospheric antennas designed to pull electricity down from the ionosphere. This is the same principle Nikola Tesla would later attempt to commercialize with his Wardenclyffe Tower. Tesla wasn't inventing something new. He was trying to bring back the free energy that the Tartarians used to light their cities. But free energy is a threat to those who want to rule through scarcity. If energy is free and wireless, you can't meter it. You can't tax it. You can't control the movement of the population. The Vatican and the emerging industrial titans realized that for the new world to function, the old world's energy had to be replaced by something they could sell. They replaced the aether with oil. They replaced the atmospheric antennas with telephone poles and wires that resemble a spiderweb of control. It was a heist of global proportions. They stole the history, they stole the technology, and they even stole the children. And as the last of the old world survivors passed away, the only thing left of Great Tartaria was a few entries in old encyclopedias that they missed during the purge. But as we are discovering today, you can't bury the truth forever. The very soil is starting to give up its secrets. The mud flood layers are being uncovered by construction crews every day, and the more we look at the dates, the more we realize the Vatican's timeline just doesn't add up. To understand the mechanics of this erasure, we have to follow the Black Robes. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the Jesuit order was the intellectual special forces of the Vatican. They weren't just missionaries, they were master astronomers, cartographers, and historians. They were sent on deep cover missions to the heart of the Tartarian territories, places like China, Russia, and Central Asia. Official records show these Jesuit scholars assisting local emperors with their calendars and historical records. But what if they were actually there to standardize the local history? By aligning the Eastern records with the Vatican's new standard chronology, they effectively synchronized a global lie. They ensured that no matter where you went in the world, the story of the past was the same. The epicenter of this control is the Archivio Apostolico Vaticano, the Vatican Secret Archives. It contains over 53 miles of shelving, some of which is located in climate-controlled bunkers deep underground. While the Church claims the archives are open to qualified researchers, the reality is much different. You cannot browse the shelves. You must request a specific document by its exact reference number. But how can you request a document if its very existence has been scrubbed from the catalogue? It is a closed-loop system designed to keep the most sensitive maps and genealogies of the Tartarian Empire out of public hands. Imagine what is hidden in those 53 miles. We are talking about the true maps of the pre-1800s world. Maps that would show the Antiquitech power grid in full operation. This brings us back to the work of Anatoly Fomenko and his new chronology. Fomenko used mathematical analysis and celestial alignment data to prove that the historical record we use today is a total fabrication. His research suggests that the ancient Greece and ancient Rome we admire were actually much more recent civilizations that existed just before the Great Reset. Fomenko's formula is simple but world-shattering. He argues that the Vatican artificially added roughly 1,000 years to the calendar. $_official su T_sexual sage plus 1,000 I text ye years year sage dollars. By inserting a millennium of darkness known as the Middle Ages, the Church pushed the high-tech era of Tartaria into the realm of myth. This made the ruins of their advanced cities seem like ancient relics that couldn't possibly be understood by modern man rather than technology that was working just 200 years ago. It was a brilliant psychological trick. If people believe that progress is a slow, difficult climb from the Dark Ages, they are less likely to notice that they have actually been pushed down the ladder. The Vatican didn't just hide the books, they hid the blueprints. Consider the pipe organs found in every major cathedral. They are often massive, featuring thousands of pipes and intricate metalwork. Mainstream history says they are for music. But some acoustic researchers have found that these organs are perfectly tuned to frequencies that promote cellular healing and mental clarity. What if these cathedrals were not built for worship in the modern sense, but were vibrational healing centers powered by the atmospheric energy captured by the spires on the roof? By relabeling these technological hubs as churches, the Vatican took control of the energy and the narrative in one move. They didn't just hide the history, they hid the power. And the technology that once belonged to all of humanity is exactly what they charge you for today. You might be wondering why any of this matters in the 21st century. If an empire fell 200 years ago, why go to such lengths to keep it a secret today? The answer is found in your monthly utility bill. The world we live in is built on a foundation of artificial scarcity. We are told that energy is a finite resource that must be pulled from the ground, refined, and sold back to us at a premium. But if Tartaria was real, it proves that free energy isn't a pipe dream. It's an inheritance that was stolen from us. By destroying the Antiquitech spires and domes that once harnessed the Earth's electrical field, the architects of the reset forced humanity into a centralized grid. They replaced the self-sustaining, wireless power of the old world with a metered system of wires and fossil fuels. This shift didn't just create a profit, it created a leash. If you can control a person's access to light, heat, and information, you control their entire reality. The monarchy church industrial complex that rose from the ashes of Tartaria understands this perfectly. This is also why we see such a massive push for smart cities and digital surveillance today. It is the final phase of the control system that began with the Jesuit missions and the Great Reset. But the suppression isn't just about electricity, it's about your identity. If you know you are the descendant of a global, advanced, and peaceful civilization, you are much harder to manipulate. A person who knows their true history cannot be easily led into meaningless wars or distracted by manufactured divisions. The powers that be want you to believe you are a primitive who finally evolved into a modern consumer. They want you to believe that the peak of human achievement is a smartphone, not a cathedral that heals with sound. When you look at modern architecture, you see grey, soulless boxes. Compare that to the old-world buildings that still stand in our cities, structures that were built with beauty, mathematics, and frequency in mind. We are living in the ruins of a golden age, being told that we've never had it better. But as the mud flood evidence comes to light and the Tartarian maps resurface, the spell is beginning to break. The evidence is all around us, hidden in plain sight. It's in the half-buried windows of our downtown streets, the impossible architecture of the world's fairs, and the missing entries in our oldest encyclopedias. Tartaria was not a myth. It was a global reality, a civilization that mastered the very elements of the earth before it was systematically dismantled and erased by those who sought to rule the ruins. The Vatican may hold the maps, and the schools may teach the standard chronology, but they cannot stop the truth from rising through the soil. We are finally beginning to see the Great Reset for what it truly was, a heist of our collective human heritage. Next time you walk past an old stone building with spires reaching for the sky, look closer. Ask yourself, is that a relic of a primitive past or a piece of a suppressed future? If you want to help uncover the truth, look at the links in the description for the declassified CIA documents and the original 1771 Britannica entries. Don't forget to subscribe as we dive deeper into the mud flood layers found in your own backyard. The truth isn't just out there, it's right under your feet.